You're listening to Real Crime,
Hi.
the Movie Sleuth podcast.
I'm not listening, I'm talking.
Dude, the same thing happened last week.
Every week.
I thought we canceled last week.
Here's number.
That was 2 weeks
Here's
ago.
the rule, dude. You don't talk over the chick. We're not allowed to talk over the chick. The hot chick that did the thing for us that you talked about, that you paid.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad she got paid and it wasn't just like free labor.
What'd you pay her with, Chris?
I paid her on Fiverr. That was a Fiverr deal. It was. I paid for that on Fiverr.
What the hell's Fiverr? I don't even know what the hell.
Fiverr is a website where you can basically pay money to have any kind of job done. You
Real
can
Crime,
promote
sponsored by Fiverr.com.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
You
So
should
you
pay
just
him.
paid
You should just pay him
$5?
$5 for just doing that.
Yeah, you just I don't have $5.
So it was just $5?
Yes, it was $5.
I could use $5.
She recorded that and then gave it to you.
Yeah, just the
Yeah, you can
voiceover.
do a bunch
of
of stuff
I
like
I
that on
paid
Fiverr.
separately for the bumper music.
Yeah.
But the actual voiceover was a professional voiceover actress.
Wow.
And she has a thing on Fiverr, and you can pay her $5 to record anything.
She did a great job.
Yeah, it sounds good.
I've always liked that. It's been,
Yeah, me too.
But you guys fuck it up every week now by talking over her. You just destroy the whole thing.
She gets what she deserves.
There are literally dozens of episodes where you can hear her voice.
Yes.
So
And no
we're
royalties either.
Well, if we're changing things, I just want to know what's going on here. I want a fucking email next time.
Okay.
Something.
All right.
Notification.
You get
We need to communicate here.
I'll
as a
send you a
group.
Facebook notification.
Carrier pigeon.
Yes.
Any smoke signal, anything. I don't care, dude. Just give me something.
Yeah.
This is the Real Crime.
Number?
78.
Not actually sponsored by Fiverr.
No.
No, not this week.
But we are sponsored by the Flint Institute of Arts.
Dude, I sent a drone up there this week.
Yeah, you sent a drone last week.
Did I?
too,
Oh, shit, did I?
Yeah.
Oh, damn. Oh, well, I sent another drone there this week.
I sent him a helicopter.
Yeah, and I checked it out. It's on my computer. I'm like, this place is so great. Someday I will be here.
Yeah.
We will.
We'll go there
As
one
I-
of these days.
As I do the thumb thing. Yeah. Someday we will go.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Also, make sure to check out projectorscreen.com. They are our other sponsor.
God, they rule.
Yeah. Really cool stuff on there, actually.
Oh, God, no, it's amazing.
Yep.
If you
And if you
haven't
visit
been there,
them,
go ahead.
and if you contact us, we can actually give you a coupon code for 10% off. So make sure you check them out, too.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah, so, Chris.
Yeah. The news. What's in the news?
Yeah, let's fuck the whole fighting thing. Like, just give it to me. I want to know.
Yeah,
what happened this week.
there's no more fighting. I'm.
You rule the streets now. You're
I rule-
Superfly.
I rose to the top.
You're Youngblood now. You are
Yeah.
Superfly. You run the streets, so it's all over with. You just get the news, and there's no drama anymore.
All right. So in news this week, Ready Player One is going to make $42 million over its opening weekend, which is pretty fucking huge for a first movie.
That's sick.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Can we predict the future now?
But
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
advanced ticket sales. I would
Advanced
assume.
ticket sales,
Gotcha.
yes. But I can predict the future too.
Also, okay.
And the other future thing that I'm going to predict is that the solo movie
Fuck this shit.
is going to introduce more Legends characters into canon.
I can't wait.
Yeah. Not really looking forward to it, but they're going to bring back some of the characters from what became Legends, the old canon.
Yeah.
They're bringing them into Star Wars now. So,
Great.
yeah. Arrested Development is coming back again.
Yeah.
They are currently filming a new season. The last season was in 2013.
And it
Yeah, I
was
was gonna say,
bad.
this
It
is-
was bad too.
I was going to
That's
say,
what I
this is like
heard.
their third comeback now, or second comeback, I should say.
Are they doing the thing where they're filming, where they're not actually filming together and they're green screening and putting stuff together? Because that was one of
Probably.
the problems with the. I mean, it wasn't terrible. It's just there was a bunch of scenes with zero chemistry, which is what that show was all about.
Yeah.
So we're making film like we're making records now.
Yeah, there was a bunch of like green screen shots where they like stitch pieces together of people in different areas. Not like
that
the whole
don't
thing.
work.
Horrible.
That don't
happened.
worry. That may work for music, but not for movies.
It's terrible.
It was a weird season.
That's ridiculous.
In other news, X-Men Dark Phoenix has actually been pushed way back. They are pushing it back to next February now
Wow.
to try and take advantage of next winter film season.
Isn't February like the garbage month where they dump shit movies?
Yeah, so they're going to actually kind of try to use that as a launching pad to make a lot of money off of it.
Or it's bad.
It is. The last time they tried it, it was bad. Now they're trying it again. Last but not least, Jeff Goldblum today teased that Laura Dern is going to potentially be appearing in upcoming Jurassic Park movies. So,
Oh, that's cool.
I like Jeff Goldblum. He's a nice guy.
I love
Sexy.
Laura Dern.
Yeah, Laura Dern's sexy too.
I've always loved her.
Yeah. So, in releases this week, we've got Ready Player One. We've got a new Tyler Perry movie called Acrimony.
Woo!
We've got the next God's Not Dead movie, A Light in the Darkness.
Ooh.
And another movie called Birthmarked. So, yeah, we've got one really big one this week and 3 that are not so big.
Well, that's really great, Chris. Thanks for
Yeah.
letting us know about
I've
that.
never even heard of Birthmark.
I think maybe we even reviewed this one early. I think we might have had a screener of this one. But, yeah. So, that's our news and our releases this week.
Yeah.
So, do we have anything for suggested viewings for this week?
What about you, Chris?
I'm actually going to suggest the one that me and Michelle saw at South by Southwest, Upgrade. I know it's way ahead of time, but I strongly suggest seeing this movie. It was pretty fucking amazing. So that's all I have to say about it because I don't want to spoil it.
All right, Michelle, it's your turn.
Yeah, spit it out, woman.
I think for this week I'm gonna pick Unsane.
Stop. For this week, I'm going to pick Unsane. Go ahead, Michelle.
But that's it. No, it's the new movie by Steven Soderbergh.
Yeah.
I might be messing his name up, but he filmed the entire thing with an iPhone 7, so it's not even like the new iPhone. It was an older iPhone, but it's actually this really incredibly trashy exploitation flick, and the iPhone aesthetic really adds to that.
It
And
so does.
It's like super fucked up too, like on a deep down level. And
Go
actually,
deep.
It's the best movie. It's the best 2018 movie I've seen.
Sweet.
So far.
Yeah, it's... Yeah. Keep talking, Michelle.
The
my
end.
goodness.
That's all I have.
What the fuck? All right, Justin.
I don't watch movies. I don't even
Okay.
know why.
Do you have
I'm
a
on this
game you
podcast.
want to suggest? Since we're going to be talking
Do
about...
I have a game we want to suggest? Yeah, a couple weeks ago, a game came out called Into the Breach from the developers of FTL, which was an indie game that came out a couple years ago. It's a turn-based tactics game. It's giant robots versus kaiju. It's like Gundams meets Godzilla, but on a chessboard. It's more exciting than it sounds.
That sounds amazing already.
But yeah, it's really fun. And it looks... If anyone ever played like Advanced Wars or Final Fantasy Tactics, it's one of those, but it has a lot of nuance to it because it's really as much of a puzzle game as it is a tactics game. It's really neat. As far as movies, the last movie I saw recently, not in the theaters, was Attack the Block. And if you like John Boyega and you haven't seen that movie, you should see it.
That's
It's really
been brought
good.
up several times
That's
on
a good
this
movie.
show. Hell yeah.
I had never seen it. It's great.
So, Michelle kind of already stole my thunder. I literally just came from the theater here from seeing Unsane. And you pretty much covered it, Michelle. The one thing I want to note on that movie, though, that I was talking to Chris outside about, was that this movie, go see it first off. You really will be doing yourself a favor. You really need to see this flick. It's a perfect example that we've talked about on this show of several movies we've seen where less is more. It really is. There's so much stuff that's happening, and like you said, Michelle, on a very deep level that... You know, somebody could have just went over the top and went completely insane with it, right?
Yeah.
And Steven Soderbergh didn't do that. He just let your mind work with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what made that movie so much fun to watch. And it really kept me literally on the edge of my seat the whole way. Partly because I drank a beer during the movie also, so I had to pee really bad. but I was really into the flick. So yeah, I don't want to go nuts on it. I really want people to see this movie because yeah, it was filmed on an iPhone 7 and it gave it like you said, Michelle, it gave it a really kind of different look. But it was shot well.
Yeah.
I don't think it was shot just on one iPhone 7. Was it just one iPhone 7?
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's like staged like a normal movie. It's just all the camera works iPhones. So I'm sure they had like lots of iPhones.
Yeah, I'm sure I was thinking about that when I was watching. Like they had to have multiple things set up for this.
Because they have like shot, reverse shot, and stuff like that going
yeah,
on. So there's definitely they're using more than one at a time.
Yeah, so super cool movie. Yeah, that's mine and Michelle's pick for this week, I think. I'm going to go see it again, I think.
I might see it tomorrow because I think I'm going to have a half day off work tomorrow.
It was that good. It was just so. It was so awesome.
It's also very different from the trailer. Like the trailer is misleading as to how like the movie plays out. I was like, what?
Immensely complicated. Fooled you. Beautiful, beautiful movie. So yeah, go see that. Go see Unsane. Definitely. So this week's a bit different, I think. And you're leaking this shit the night before now with your little Monday thing you do now.
Well, yeah, we got to let people know what we got coming up. So
Look
they know
at me,
what to
I'm
be paying
Chris.
attention.
Your little Monday.
Your little Monday.
Your little Monday.
Look at me, I'm Chris. I'm going to talk about all this shit that you don't know about yet.
Yeah.
We're not going to surprise you with anything
That's
whatsoever.
how he knows about the future, man.
Yeah.
I'm psychic. Look at me, I'm Chris. But yeah, no, in all
You're
seriousness,
so mean to me.
we're going to be talking about retro gaming tonight.
Yeah.
Different, never done this before. But I think I've been kind of riffing on that, as I've said in the past couple of shows. It's been kind of something I've been playing around with and literally breaking out my old consoles and playing around with them and using the emulators and having fun with that stuff and just kind of reacquainting myself with, at least, given my age, Atari 2600 and the NES, right? That's kind of where, and like, I'm not at your level at all, Justin. I'm like, that's kind of where it ends for me, to be honest with you.
I mean, those are both fantastic pieces of gaming history.
I know I've bought, personally, I did buy a PlayStation. I bought one. I'm like, I'm going to get back into gaming. This will be great, because I had a handful of years off, and I bought a PlayStation, and I played it. I had a handful of games, and it just wasn't the same for me. I mean, I'm not knocking it. I know it's its own thing. But when PlayStation came out, that blew everybody's freaking mind. Like, oh my God, it's PlayStation. Look at these games now. We did buy a PlayStation 2, and I bought a Wii. That was more for Amber. And what's that? Xbox One or whatever. Is that what? So I bought all this shit because I don't think you can really get away from buying the stuff anymore.
Yeah.
You have to buy it.
There's always something new to buy.
Well, especially like looking at install bases of the newest generation of consoles.
Yeah.
Fucking everyone in America has an Xbox or a PS4. They've sold like 100, between the two of them, well over 100 million. That's like a third of the population of the U.S.
Oh my God, dude. Really?
Yeah.
A lot of people just use them for media centers.
Yeah, they're just like, oh, this is my Blu-ray player that plays Netflix, and every once in a while my boyfriend plays Madden.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing that makes the new systems of today much, much, much different. They truly are entertainment systems. And I know when the NES came out, it's obviously called the Nintendo Entertainment System, right?
Yeah.
Before, it was a video computer system, which that's the VCS, that was the Atari.
Yeah, Atari.
The Atari 2600 had, a couple different names. 2600,
7800.
VC. Well, that was a different model.
The different
There
model.
was
But
two
I'm
other
talking about the
models.
2600 itself. It was called
The VCS was the first name before they
VCS,
called it.
which it's still
Video
on
computer
there,
system,
right?
yeah.
I have it on I have one of the old wooden deck ones, the old school
Oh, wow,
ones.
yeah.
And they also called, the original project name was called Stella. That was its actual name. There's actual emulators that are called Stella out there now too. So I guess for me, diving back into this stuff, and I think I've said it on this show too, I was sick a couple months ago, and I blame watching the entire Raiders of the Lost Ark trilogy on this, right? Because I watched those, and those are fantastic movies. All three of them are amazing. And that sprouted this little kernel in my mind to say, hey, you haven't played Atari 2600 Raiders of the Lost Ark in a long time. And it's very easy to just go on the web and find an emulator to play it on now.
Well, yeah, especially Atari stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So, you can literally get any game that was made for the 2600, anything. It don't matter what company it was, they're all out there now.
I mean, you can get them all on cartridge too. They're all dirt cheap because they made 10 billion of them.
Yeah,
each
well, that
game
too,
and crashed the industry.
And I have been, because with my thing is like, let's talk a little history, because I've been doing a lot of this stuff, and I don't want to eat up all the mic time here, but we'll get this out there because this is a good bedrock for what we're going to talk about. Because the big, game boom, the gaming boom was really from like 79 to 83.
83, yeah.
83 is when it crashed, right? And I remember this day very vividly when I was a kid, because a couple months before this day I'm talking about, you couldn't touch an Atari cartridge, an Activision cartridge, or an iMagic cartridge for less than $30 or more, right? Any game. And then one day I remember vividly, is that your phone, Chris?
It was this. It's all good.
I'm beating you. Then one day I remember my mom, my dad, and myself were at a Big Lots. I don't know if that's a Michigan thing or not. Maybe a nation. I don't know. But a Big Lots. And I still like playing Atari games. I still was enjoying it. I was too young to try to understand what was happening with the market.
Yeah,
at
the
time.
market.
I just like playing Pitfall and freaking Raiders of the Lost Ark and shit like that.
Yeah.
Right? We went to a Big Lots, and there were these bins and bins of games from all different companies. Because at this time, and what we're talking about, every company was trying to get involved with this. There was just money being printed literally as a result of this. So everybody would, Mattel, anybody, you name it. Some company, they were trying to get into making game cartridges because it was literally a license to print money. At least they thought it was.
Well, a lot of them got into making consoles too. Mattel made the Intellivision.
Coleco
made the ColecoVision.
Which was superior to the 2600 as far as games. I mean, you look at 2600, Atari Donkey Kong, and you look at like ColecoVision. They literally ColecoVision. They nailed it. It looked damn near perfect as far as like the coin operated game was concerned. But yeah, we go in there and we just see piles and piles of games, brand new in the boxes. $1. $2.
Yeah.
And now I'm going back and listening to all this history and listening to podcasts and all these people who worked for these companies talking about what was going on the back end of this. They're like, yeah, we made so many.
They were making shovelware.
Yeah, I was about to say, there were a lot of games a lot of companies that weren't game companies just pumping out trash.
Like they were garbage.
The equivalent of mini games that you saw 100% of the content in the first 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
Or they were just completely nonsense. It's like some of the nonsensical games people still feel kind of nostalgic for. Like if you ever play Superman for 26
Oh, yeah. It's ridiculous.
Like one of those games that just makes absolutely no sense, but there are people who grew up with it just love it.
Beanie Bopper was one I played.
I don't know that one.
Oh, it was a piece of shit.
Well,
but
then
it was
the infamous E.T. game.
Well, that's like we could do a whole episode on that. There's Game Over if you guys want.
Yeah,
I think I mentioned. Yeah, watch the documentary.
I've seen
Super interesting. And Howard, that guy, they say that in the documentary. Well, you watch the documentary, you'll understand what we're talking about. I mean, that guy really got a bad rap for that.
Oh, I mean, he made
6 weeks.
Yar's Revenge.
Yeah.
Like he made fantastic games for the 2600.
Yeah.
And he just no one will ever remember him for anything but other than having to work
Howard,
20 hours a day. Yeah, Howard Scott Warshaw. Having to work 20
Warshaw,
hours a day for 6 weeks to shit out this game because
he
they got a good deal to make E.T. and
Christmas.
they had to put it out.
Had to get it out by Christmas.
Which is funny because that's all the industry is about now. But
Oh, yeah, it is. It's insane. However, so this one day we just see piles and piles of games, and it's one of the few times my parents just went completely batshit crazy because before a couple months before that they were paying out, like you said, $30-$40 a cartridge for me because I had to have that game, right? And I'm like, well, we can get them any game we want right now. So I remember we just filled a basket full of games. And I went nuts. I mean, you imagine how exciting that was to come home with like 60 games that you've never seen before, you've never played before, and a lot of them sucked. but they were it was really fun.
But at that point, it's still like just the excitement of trying a new game. Even if the game sucks. Like I love trying new games even when they're bad now. Like I could imagine that was really exciting.
No, it's still that is an exciting thing, I think. So fast forward now, and I'm like, well, I want to go and play around with this again. This will be great. And family thing, Grandpa borrowed the games, a bunch of the games, and they just kind of vaporized. So I'm like, oh, what a fucking bummer, man. I did have a handful of them, which one of them was Raiders of the Lost Ark, thank goodness, and Phoenix, Video Pinball. I had a handful of games left over. Did have a funny thing happen a week or so after this whole little adventure started. I was talking with some friends at a party, and I'm like, yeah, I started doing this thing, and I'm like, I don't have any damn games in it. They're all gone. This sucks, He's like, what about all those games, my friend Dave Rabbit, from my old band, him. He's like, don't you remember that crap I gave you in the house I lived in Mount Clemens? And this is like 16, 17 years ago. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I gave you 2 cases, these old leather cases of these games I found in the house that I was renting. They were just left there. And I'm like, oh, bullshit. So I just happened to come home and look in the storage, and I open up, and I'm like, there's 2 leather cases.
I have one of those weird faux plasticky leather cases
they're horrible.
From 79. They're awful. I have one, though.
Yeah, but I opened them up, and there are 60 more games. I'm like, and literally, I mean, Amber was like, she heard me scream in the basement. I could only imagine her going, what the hell? I hit the mother load, right? So here I am playing again, right? So that's kind of, and I thought, well, this is just some weird thing I'm doing, that it's going to, whatever. But of course, I start reading into this, and I'm not very unique. This is something that's happening now with people, especially in my age bracket. Retro gaming. Now, also, it isn't just my age bracket. I mean, the research that I did, retro gaming is actually considered games that are 10 years or older.
Yeah.
That's considered retro now, which that's kind of crazy because 10 years, I mean, yeah, it's a long time, but it seems like games...
Well, I'm not sure
I don't
that's
know.
like a definitive...
It's an idea.
Agreed upon thing, because like I don't know if I would consider a game from 2008 to be retro.
That's
Like,
what people are
I don't
saying.
consider Halo 3 or like BioShock 1 or Skyrim or Oblivion to be retro.
But 10 years, there's a lot happens in 10
Oh yeah,
years, especially nowadays.
no argument there. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
a lot
if
happens
you-
in 5 years.
Yeah, if you ask me what retro gaming is to me, that's like going back to 80s, 90s.
That's what I thought.
you know.
Yeah.
that's
That's what
kind
I
of
thought. That was my idea. So
same
that's
with
retro
thing.
gaming.
Same thing is with classic rock. Like something becomes classic rock like after like 25 years, not 10.
10, yeah.
And that's kind of where I am.
I think that's the same idea.
with the gaming stuff.
Maybe
My,
that-
my cutoff is like PS1 and older.
Yeah, same.
So
PS2 was
PS1's
such,
like
a-
2000.
Yeah,
Or-
PS1 and older because to me, like, you know, the gaming separated also, like, because you had Atari and then you had Nintendo, Super Nintendo, which was pixel graphics, and then PlayStation 1 was like along with Nintendo 64 where they were like the first, like, you know, 3D you know, stuff. So that's like kind of like where I cut off the retro. PS2 maybe, but you know, I think like there's different types of retro, maybe even. Like maybe there's retro and then there's like classic gaming. Maybe that's
Well,
like
that
something
may be,
differentiated that
yeah,
way.
that's actually a great way to look at that, Michelle, is because I think I'm more into is classic gaming, like real relics. Some of the games I look back on now, I'm having fun with this, but I am kind of researching it, going back and relearning some of the coding they used to do on these things. I mean, I'm just kind of really diving into this to the nuts and bolts of it now. And yeah, some of the games are completely ridiculous looking. It's like they were cranking these things out at such a fast rate back then just to get things to market. Really at least for Atari, I'm talking Atari themselves, and this is just an opinion, but some of the stuff I look at and now understanding that what was happening in the market, in the industry at the time, they were just trying to get as many cartridges out there as they could. And I think they did sacrifice a lot of quality. I mean, just look at the Pac-Man adaptation they did for Atari 2600. I'm sure you've all seen it.
Pretty awful.
It's horrendous.
bad.
I'm not really one to shit on anything Atari. I think it's all fantastic. It was a piece of its time, right? I mean, it's the bedrock for a lot of things we have now, and I think most people do respect it for that. But go ahead.
It's a two-way street thing. It's like, in a lot of ways, you don't have modern games without Atari for the good things, because they established things like how to use controllers and how to make a home console work from both a consumer standpoint and a technical standpoint. Then you also get like the other side of seeing how hard Atari failed in the early 80s and how the crash went through informed. Like, if the Atari crash didn't happen, we probably wouldn't have the NES or what became like modern Nintendo in the late 80s, because of they learned so much
They learned from Atari.
They added the Nintendo seal of quality and all these things about making sure that games had to be like heavily licensed by Nintendo and pass a quality gates that are good, and like all these consoles had to be inexpensive and affordable and repairable, and all these things that they didn't try to do in that era before the crash. So it's like, it's
Again,
really and that's one of those interesting classic retro things, because like I would consider classic implying like all the games are really good. So like I consider NES and Super NES more like the classic era, and then Atari 2600 as retro. Not that they're bad. There's a bunch of Atari 2600 games I like, and I own a 7800 too, which has some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like, those games just, they're not, the specific ones I go back and play all the time I adore, but I don't have the nostalgia, because they weren't, as someone who grew up with a post-crash era, they just don't feel good in a lot of ways.
No, they don't. They're very clunky. They don't feel like games now, and that's the difference with us.
Well, I think
Yeah,
the
but they're really important, and I have a lot of respect for them. I just don't play them quite as much.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Nintendo, like, basically when they came out with the NES, like, they first had the Famicom in Japan, which was like an absolute smash hit, and they were selling them as quick as they were making them. So they're over in Japan, games were like totally, having a boom. And then they come to the States and they want to try to make a game system that would appeal over here. And basically they tried to work with Atari at first. They tried to make the system and have Atari, they wanted Atari basically to handle all the American side, like merchandising and all that. And Atari was like, nah, we don't want to do that because you'll be making all the money and we're going to be doing all the work. And plus Atari had just had a crash.
Yeah.
So Nintendo basically had to like do everything the opposite of what Atari was doing to make the system work. They had to make the system not look like a gaming system. They tried to make it look more like a computer because computer gaming was actually on the rise.
Yeah.
They actually brought it over one time at a toy show and nobody bought it. So they had to redesign it again.
Yeah, I read all about that.
So
it was super interesting.
Yeah. But what Nintendo did, I think that Atari didn't, is like what you were saying with quality. When the NES first came out, they like had 10 awesome games right out the bat. Like quality, like they had actual artists making their game. Not saying there weren't artists at Atari, but they were like, they had like Shiggy, making games. Like a Mario game, Mario felt like nothing else you played. Like it was smooth.
Oh, I'll never forget the first time I played
so
Mario.
Much,
it was amazing.
Well, like the 2600 era, there weren't artists. There were programmers who were making art out of two colors of blocks.
Yeah,
well,
and they didn't let them do what they were supposed to do.
There were people that did better than other people, but it was still primarily like a programming driven.
Yeah, they had artist type people who would give their input, but really, it came down to just the 8-bit programming they were dealing with, right?
But also, Atari didn't give their the people making the games credit.
Oh, it was
like
a
they would
huge
have
problem.
to sneak their names into the games and shit.
That's the reason that Activision and iMagic were born from that very point you're making, Michelle.
But Nintendo in Japan, the game makers were like revered more. They were like they listened to them and they were like
their names still weren't in the credits.
Yeah,
for a long
but
time
more
in Japan.
That's they were given more leeway, as I guess.
Yeah, but there was like Yuki-chan's Papa was like this name that came up in all these Nintendo games because it was like. I forgot what I want to say Konami or one of the not Nintendo itself, but one of the other like major Japanese producers would not allow their programmers to have their names. So there was all these pseudonyms, and it made like historians and people like there's the ultimate video game history book. It's like a really silly name, but it's really comprehensive.
Yeah.
There's a whole big subsection about like how they had trouble tracking down all these like late 80s programmers and designers because the game companies wouldn't let them put their actual first and last name in any of the credits of these games. So that actually like kept up until the early 90s, I think, for the most part.
If you look at the old Atari stuff, like it's the same type of idea with Atari. Like Michelle said, they were trying to keep the programmers under wraps. They could see that the programmers are the real rock stars here. We have to kind of keep them canopied because they'll get out of control.
Well, and they don't want other country. Yeah, they don't want other companies to come poach them. That's a big part.
Well, yeah, and that's unfortunately. And I've read some completely insane stories from the Atari era. Rob Phillips, a guy I've been studying a lot. He's done a lot of really cool games. Namely, he did the Space Invaders adaptation to Atari 2600. And that sold. They couldn't sell enough of those cartridges. Mm-hmm. It was it was actually for that game and what it was very good. They couldn't sell enough of them. And story goes basically that he thought he was going to make a ton of money on this. He was asking for a bonus, and they said, "We'll give you a bonus. That sounds great." He opens and there's a whole long story. Like he opened the envelope all excited, and they basically gave him a free turkey. Mm-hmm. He walked right then, right? And they started, and he was one of the people that started iMagic, which made my favorite Atari game, Demon Attack, my all-time favorite Atari game.
People speak really highly of that. I've never played
Demon Attack is really cool. Yeah. It's a very smooth-running game. We'll talk more about that in a second. We can get into the games here soon. But yeah, like that's how Activision and iMagic were born, like I said, Michelle, to your point. They were born with people who were frustrated with Atari. They were tired of being screwed over. They wanted a piece of they saw the money. They knew how much money was being made. So let's go start our own companies. We know how to do all this work. We can do all this, and we can find a way to license our cards to the Atari 2600, right? Which, they knew they were going to get sued. They knew going into this they were going to get sued, but they were able to work it through court. They hired attorneys, and they were able to work this through. And there's a lot of gooiness with that too, I'm sure. But they were able to make it work and license these carts for Atari. And that's why you did have, it's so funny because I remember being a kid, and I remember this now, going back to this. I found that I was more attracted to playing Activision games for Atari 2600 and iMagic games for a 2600 than Atari games for Atari 2600.
Yeah.
Because the Atari 2600, the games that were done by Atari, even the new games, weren't that good.
Well,
I mean,
Activision had a really big following, because all those high score games Activision did.
Well, yeah, Pitfall.
Yeah.
You could get the patches, Barnstorming, River Raid, and those were
Oh, yeah, River
huge
Raid's
sellers. And you could get patches for those. It was a very cool environment. Dragster, another really great Activision game.
Being
Who
in the
did,
news recently for having its
Oh, there was a big blow up. Yeah.
World record score getting
Didn't
revoked.
Activision do the Empire Strikes Back game too?
No,
No,
that was oh my god, that was another outside company.
that game was so bad.
It was.
Wait, you're
it's
talking
fun
about the
to
one
play.
where you just blow up all the walkers over
Yeah,
and over again?
yeah.
Yeah, I-
that
I-
game's
you
pretty
fly
fun.
around them and tangle up their legs. I remember
I
that
forgot
too.
who did that. I have a card of that.
Yeah, I
was
do
looking at it
too.
the
I
other
couldn't
day.
tell you who did it.
It's fun to play. It's fun to play. It don't look that good,
No.
but it's actually smoother. It was a smoother
Yeah, it
running
controls
game.
better than you would expect it.
Yeah, it's actually kind of it's fun to play. They also did the same company who did Empire Strikes Back. They did the Spider-Man game, which is really addicting to play. I have to say, it looks like shit. It looks ridiculous, but it's fun to play. If you get a chance to play the Spider-Man Atari 2600 game, you'll have fun with that. It's cool. But yeah, these guys. That's why you did see these companies that split off from Atari like that, and they made better games. Frankly, Pitfall for the time. I remember seeing Pitfall for the first time when I was a kid, and it blew my mind. I'm like, this game looks so good. Like, Pitfall Harry was actually 3 colors,
Yeah.
whereas other characters in other
You can
games...
tell that the crocodiles were actual crocodiles.
Yeah, you could, there was definition there, and there was stuff happening, and there was a purpose. Like, you had a goal you had to meet. I mean, the idea of playing games really, at least for Atari's idea, was you can't beat these games. You just keep playing them, and you keep playing them. Right?
Well, they're coming from the arcade era, which is what you needed to do to make money.
Yeah, exactly. So that now you have games that actually have a goal you can meet. You have a purpose. Chopper Command, another great Activision game. And iMagic, like I was saying, you just have these two companies out there. There were the two main companies, and there's just story upon story that you can hear about these guys going to conventions together and them all talking shit to each other. I mean, they were like friendly, cordial. But there was competition going on with these guys. So that's kind of like, where this kind. I mean, there's a lot. There's history that goes back 20 years before that. I mean, the original game, Space War.
Yeah,
Nolan Bushnell did. That was the first Atari game that got put in arcades. So the history of gaming goes back to the 50s, basically. That's the idea.
Well, yeah, there was like MUDs, those like old mainframe computer dungeon games.
Multi-user dungeon.
Yeah.
My girlfriend still plays one.
Oh, yeah, they still make MUDs.
They still have the text-based, the TUI, or it would be a text-based game.
Mm-hmm.
They still do those. People still like to play those. I think that lends, like Amber says...
Nice, Don. Nice.
Well, whatever.
I'm just commenting back in the comments here.
You see I'm working here, don't you?
Nope.
Do you interrupt an artist when they're painting a picture? No,
Yes.
you don't. No, I was saying, Amber, we talked about that. I'm like, why don't you play like something? She's like, this is just more imaginative. We just have fun with this. We have room to dream here a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing with text adventures. Yeah, like, just you're in a room. Do you go north? It explains the room to you. That's all there was to it, like.
That's what MUD is, basically.
Yeah.
It's the same idea.
Except they're on mainframe, so you can actually like play them. So the later ones you could play with other people, though. It was like a pre-internet, just local thing. But yeah.
Yeah. So this idea of retro gaming, as I was saying before, go ahead. What were you going to say?
What draws us to this now? Like even H was just asking on here, what is it about these games that keeps us going back to them? Is it the quality of the games? Is it nostalgia? Is it that they're more fun? I mean, we've got a few people commenting on here saying that past the PS2, games weren't fun anymore.
Well, okay.
Which
Well,
I
I don't know
disagree
about
with.
that.
I disagree with.
I
but
think why people like retro gaming is, for one, they're more simplistic. And I don't say simplistic in a bad way, but the gameplay is more at the forefront. Now you have a lot of other things going on around a game. Like when you have a game that comes out now, it's got $1 million advertising thing. It's got like, oh, we have this so and so actors doing the voice acting. Mm-hmm. This has the newest graphics. Is it in 4K? Everybody's like, oh, is it 60 frames per second? Everybody's like, so obsessed with the graphics.
There's a lot of technical things that are going on here.
So all that's kind of like, covering up the actual gameplay. Like, is the gameplay good? Back in the day, the game was just all the gameplay. That's all you had. I mean, you had the graphics too, but they just served the purpose of like making it so you could play the actual game. Like if you play Mario, like your whole like Super Mario Brothers on NES, you have Mario, you jumping on stuff, and you go forward. Like it sounds very simplistic, but the way it's built is very compelling and well done and tight, and the controls are tight. And it's just, it's just the game. That's all there is the game. Now there's so much stuff surrounding it. And shit, now we don't even get the whole game. We got DLC, pre-DLC. If you buy it from Kmart, you get some extra DLC. It's like...
It's too complicated.
There's too much stuff around gaming now, I think, that kind of... Like, there's actually like a secondary indie game boom going on right now. And all of it kind of centers around like pixelated games. Like I just played Celeste.
Homegrown. Homebrews.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are really flocking towards indie gaming, I think, because they crave just having good, fun games to play instead of all the rigor,
Well, the home brewing, I don't want to call it market, but the home brewing community for 2,600 carts again it's growing and growing. There's people out there going back to the 6502 programming, assembly, old school.
Yeah.
And they're making games to the point where I'm like, I can do this. This would be fun to do, and make a joke game just on a friend. I mean, it's not easy work. It takes time, but it can be done. So there is a homebrew community like you're talking about, Michelle, that are going all the way back to games like that, which I find fascinating. With all the technology we have, people still want to go back. Not everybody, but a handful of people want to go back and play these games or write their own games, which is what they're doing. One of the things that I was just kind of reading around on this idea of, retro gaming and why, at least people in my age group, like our age group, Chris, at the time, I think there were some games that were aimed at adults. They were trying to capture some of that market, right? But the vast majority, I think, when we were kids and games were all our whole lives, it was aimed at kids, right? I think now, as adults, I guess we can call ourselves adults.
Something like that.
Maybe.
There's a lot more disposable.
We're doing a podcast on games. I don't think we can call ourselves adults. Not quite.
There's a lot more, but at our age, there is more disposable income. I know also, at least for me, maybe, I don't know. I don't want to get too deep about this, but I know when I hit 40, I kind of got nostalgic. Like, oh my God, I'm 40 now. Let's look back on our life. And then the flashbacks and shit. And like one of the things was like I looked back and said, wow,
oh, look at that. The stream finally cleared up. Wow, amazing. Sorry for cutting you off. Go ahead.
What clear?
We were getting a lot of pixelation tonight for some reason.
Can they see this?
Can you guys see that?
Make sure you guys all see that.
Can you guys see that? Okay, I think they did.
Yeah, great. Outstanding. So I think that's one of those things too. At least for me, there is a comfort. It's a nice comfort to kind of look at Demon Attack again. Not on an emulator. I could do that anytime I want. To actually sit down and take the cart. And I watched another interview where somebody said, people just like to clunk that cart in. Or slide that, in the old NES, slide that cart in there, right? There is a feeling about, and I like that ka-chunk. It's cool, man.
It's twofold. I think people like going back and playing that game on the system from when they were a kid. That's really fun.
Yeah.
But it's that nostalgic feeling of like, oh, I want to watch
that joystick.
I want to watch the original cut of Star Wars again, all grainy and shit, because that's how I saw it when I was a kid.
Yeah,
I think
the same idea.
It's the same exact thing.
No different.
It brings back, it hits that certain little emotional area in your brain, and some endorphins are released, and you're happy.
I think there's like a physicality to that stuff too, because now that everything's digital all the time, like there's no There's nothing stopping me from grabbing my phone and streaming almost any movie without having to do anything but tap a screen a few times.
Yeah.
And it's like a nice thing to know that, like, when I play this game on a cartridge, it is a physical object that I bought that is mine and will functionally work forever. It is not just like some credit card transaction I did that gives me the license on a streaming service to have access to this thing that maybe might go away if some business deal goes raw in 5 years or something, and then actually having to, I don't know, work for something. I have access to like a lot. I have like a pretty like extensive emulator setup on my PC with RetroArch, which is this like platform that lets you insert other emulators into it, and you can emulate literally everything.
Yeah.
And I don't use it because I just like enjoy actually putting, taking the effort of hooking my old stuff up and putting in carts and figuring out what I want to play. And it's not just, I don't know, it adds some kind of like weird meaning to things where I don't feel like the games that I'm playing are disposable in a way that you go on Steam or something these days, and in the month of January, 480 new games came out on Steam.
That's insane.
Like, more than 90% of them didn't make like minimum wage equivalent money in sales, and you can't even identify what they are because there's just such like you could spend a full-time job going through all the new releases on that platform and still not play or identify all of them. It's just like such a disposable mass thing, but because it's an online digital platform, it's not going to crash because it's not costing the platform owners any money in a way that like a mass production of physical objects crashed Atari.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know.
No, a really good example of why, having physical copies of things is a good thing is the demo PT that came out. That was like probably one of the top 5 best horror experiences gaming wise I've ever had. And it was a demo, but they literally took it off the system and you can't download it anymore. So there's like a little piece of gaming art that like Kojima made that you can't access anymore because they decided you can't have it. Had that been a disc, it's yours now. It's yours forever. It's the same reason why we collect films. Why I collect films, because it's easier if I have an actual physical Blu-ray. I always have this movie, and I know I can access it anytime I want. And it's not like Netflix, where Netflix changes what it has like every week. So and then people are like, "Oh, boo-hoo! It's I don't have this thing." When I'm like, "Oh, it's right there." Same thing with gaming.
In regards to movies too, Michelle, and it's funny you mention that because I think about that. Like I stream plenty of movies, right? And some of them are good, some are not so good. I don't know. But whether they're good or not, if I'm streaming them, I tend, and I've had this happen to me before, it's embarrassing. People are like, "Hey, did you see that movie?" I'm like, did I? Did I see that movie? I don't know if I saw that movie. And then I go home and look at my Netflix or something like that. I'm like, I maybe watch a couple frames. I'm like, holy crap, I watched that movie. That doesn't mean it's a bad movie. It's just, but the point is, when I buy a movie, well, I've made an investment into that movie now. I tend to stick that deeper into my gray matter that way, and I tend to retain, like, okay, I did see that movie. I've invested into this movie. I've invested into this physical piece of art that we're talking about, right? And it's no different for games, I think, too. And that's what makes, I think we've seen this happen with music. We've seen it happen with movies. We've seen it happen with games. We've even seen it happen with books now, right? And it isn't to shit. We've talked about this before. And at least from my standpoint, I want to be clear that I'm not shitting on digital media.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with digital games.
I think it's really great and convenient. And, what's the use of having technology if you can't use it to its fullest potential, right? However, I do think that it does. That's one of the byproducts of it, though, is that things just, like you said, 400 and something games in 1 month. I mean, literally, there's only 400. I think there's like 400 or 500 games that were made for the 2600. With all these companies, that was over like maybe 6-7 years possibly, because it started back in '77, right? So with the original Sears type games that were going, there was all.
I don't think it was consumer till '79, but
sure. Yeah, but the Sears was doing games though.
Well, there was I don't want to get into a pedantic, stupid historical thing. So there was like the Atari 800 and the Atari computer system, which also had games, which was prior to the VCS and wasn't like it used tapes and discs and was more like a computer that also played games and not like the VCS or the 2600 that was like a dedicated gaming system. So yeah, there was stuff all the way back to like the MX1000 and stuff in like 75 and 75 through 77, but there wasn't as many.
Well, the point is that population of games equals to like one month of output, right? No matter how many years it was. So that's just kind of mind numbing. But all that output from those games, they were all physical games though. They were all something you could put your hand on. You can still find these games. So that's kind of numbing. I think this idea. Well, I think it's awesome. I think we all think it's awesome. It does, I think, maybe make things much more disposable. Not only just from a physical, they're very disposable from a physical standpoint, but much more disposable mentally.
Oh yeah,
sure. You're not retaining. I mean, you're not supposed to remember everything, I guess, but that's kind of I've had that happen where I don't remember seeing that movie. Because I fucking streamed it one time on Netflix, and
it's interesting hearing that too, because now there is, with like Twitch and these game streaming services, you have all these people who do, and this is, I guess, not about retro, but whatever. You have all these people that are like, oh, well, I don't want to spend $60 in this game. I'll just watch a full playthrough on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
That too.
And they'll say like the
element.
equivalent. They'll be like, "Oh, I beat that game," or "Oh, yeah, well, I watched that. I watched someone play the whole game. I know everything there is to know." And it's just like
no,
this whole.
You didn't.
It'd be like
that doesn't count.
I would be lying if I said I hadn't like watched the ending to a game that I started because I wanted to see how it ended, but I wasn't interested in continuing to play it.
Maybe like an alternate ending.
Yeah, or like watching other endings of like 60-hour game that I didn't want to put a bunch more time into. But like the people, I think they're like value way too highly on like just like just whatever. I'll just watch someone else play it at some point. Like I like watching other people play games, but it is not the same mental value as actually putting in the effort yourself.
I'm sure there's a whole debate on some other podcast just about that subject alone.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because I mean, to me, it is like wow. Like wait a minute, so.
YouTube is full of long plays, call just like full playthroughs of games.
Oh, I've watched the hell out of them.
Yeah,
because I'm not a contemporary gamer. I mean, I'm not a gamer. I'm a bad classic gamer. I'm fucking terrible at this shit.
That's fine, man.
I'm not a good gamer, but I enjoy it. But there's been games where I have been like, I want to play Dead Space. I want to try that out, and I got about me half an hour into it. I'm like, I can't do this shit. I don't have the patience for this, and I. Straight to YouTube. Let's see how this ends, and that's great. That is really cool to see that done. But yeah, if you consider yourself a gamer, you're just a watcher. You're a game watcher. You're a spectator. You're the equivalent of what we are when we were kids, Chris. When we go to the arcade and watch some other guy just kick ass on Dragon's Lair or something like that, or on Mach 3 or something like that, or Mach 1 or whatever. I mean, you're a spectator. You're no different. But instead of standing around a cabinet with a bunch of kids with cigarettes hanging out of their mouth, you're sitting on YouTube with millions of other people watching this person kick major ass on a game
with vape pens sticking out of your
mouth. When we were at South by Southwest, they had the gaming competition going on.
Yeah,
and it was a mobile app. These two dudes were like sitting on stage playing a mobile app.
It was the stupidest thing I've ever seen.
And there's like,
by the way,
a bunch of people in like stadium style seating, sitting there watching these kids play mobile apps on their iPhones.
But it was funny because like the commentator guy was trying to make it sound really exciting, but it's just two guys looking at their phone.
Yeah, I can't imagine that being like totally.
Yeah,
they had them up on big screens though, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I actually love watching competitions, like fighting game competitions and stuff.
Oh yeah,
because
Evo's fun. I don't even play fighting games, and I will watch fighting games.
Yeah, it's like because every player has their own personality surrounding them, and they got their own thing, and it's exciting, and they're like, it's like you get really into it. But that was just dumb. Watching two guys play a cell phone game is the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. It's gonna get even worse. Like the current biggest modern game, Fortnite Battle Royale, just launched their iPad version, and it's like, oh, this game made $3 million in the first 48 hours just from the phone version.
Holy crap.
What is it with this Fortnite game? My daughter keeps talking about it.
She doesn't even like it.
So that's how you know it's popular. It's when all like the teens and tweens are talking about it. So it's just Fortnite. Like, so there's a game that came out last year called PUBG, as Players Unknown Battlegrounds. It's just like, Battle Royale, like the film Battle Royale.
Yeah.
It's that. You it's 100 people drop onto an island full of weapons. They drop in this case, you jump off of a plane. onto an island full of weapons all over the map, and it's last man standing, by any means necessary, kill everyone.
Holy crap.
Wow.
And it got insanely popular super fast, and then a lot of people played it, and then they realized that like it's a really like subtle, because it's built on old relative term, late 2000s survival games like Arma, these games that are built by like dudes with military fetishizations who like have like, oh, you need to craft bandages if you get shot in your arm, you have to like bandage yourself, and all the like the bullet drop is really accurate, and all the weapons have really specific well crafted things, and so it's based on this really like simulation-y thing. And it makes for really cool moments of like, oh, well, I was hiding in this room and I heard footsteps outside, and I backed in this corner and caught people off guard, and it was really neat. But it's like really, really intense, and games go 40 minutes to an hour, and if you die, there's only one winner out of 100 people.
Yeah.
So Epic Games, who has been developing this other game, I mean, it's Fortnite, the single-player game, for 10 years or something, just said, hey, let's try to do this and make it more approachable and cartoony and easier to play. And then they did that, and then every human being between the age of 9 and 18. Oh, and it's free also. Fortnite Battle Royale is totally free on consoles, phones, PC, everything.
Wow.
So it's like, hey, we're going to do a better, easier game that's more approachable with shorter matches, built on the same like fun idea of 100 people jump off a plane and kill each other. And then they said, hey, we're going to offer it free, sell a bunch of costumes and in-game purchases and shit, and then get all the streamers and teenagers in it. And then now literally everyone plays it. And it has like 4.5 million active players at any given time for the most part. And they released like a fully playable, like you would never want to play a first-person shooter on a phone, and people are just eating it up. It's
I have
wild.
a question. This was just a couple of years ago, and I forgot the name of the damn game, and I'm sure you do. There was this game that it exploded overnight, and it was a game where you just would visit planets. It was that.
Are you talking about No Man's Sky?
No Man's Sky, thank you. That thing seemed to vaporize. I haven't heard a word.
Yeah, because the guy that made the game lied about practically
it was
every
all
aspect
hype, and
of
then
it.
it came out, and then it just
And everybody was like,
What
died
happened?
on the vine.
he made a bunch of promises he couldn't keep, basically, and lied about all kinds of like game modes he was going to be in it. And then the game comes out and everybody's like they're basically, it's like, randomly generated planets or whatever. But he was like, oh man, if you and some other person's on the same planet, you can like meet up. And then so like literally the day the game came out, two people went to the same planet and like couldn't find each other, and they're like, wait a minute. And then basically they found out all the shit he lied about that was supposed to be in the game.
Oh, so that's why it died on the vine. Then.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah, it was like a bunch of really ambitious ideas that were really cool, but the game came out probably 6 months to a year before it should have, and they made a bunch of promises about like, oh, it really did have this infinite world. Like there was really advanced technology behind the game, and they generated a thing that's like literally in the trillions of numbers of planets. Like it was a functionally infinite amount of game, and you weren't either. It's like, oh, even if 100 million people play this game, no one's going to find each other in the first 2 years or something. And people found each other the day it came out, and then discovered that all these things about multiplayer just weren't in the game. You could stand as far as me next to each other like this on the same planet, and you couldn't see each other because there's no actual multiplayer in the game.
Oh my
Funny
God.
enough, had he just said what the game was, people would have like dug that. I mean,
because it was a cool like kind of solo space trucking simulator for me. I just like found a cool ship and just like mined stuff and put on like a good soundtrack and just explored the universe and collected shit and sold it and made money, and it was like a fun enough thing. But it got old really fast, and there was a million things they told us would be there that weren't. My review is on the site if you ever want to check it out.
Yeah,
I gave it a 4 out. It is the lowest score I've ever given to a movie.
Holy crap!
A game. I gave it a 4 out of 10.
Well, I mean, I was really interested in that when I just saw the hype coming up, and I started reading. I'm like, well, now this sounds like something I could play, and I never got around to it, But I'm glad I didn't, because I think the reason is it just died that fast.
Well, and then they had so much bad press because Sony published it. It wasn't just like a small company. Like Sony put money behind this and put a bunch of money into the marketing, and then ate a mouthload of shit for it.
Sounds delicious.
There was such a bad response that the team continued. So it's actually like a much better game now than it was when it launched because they've continued to support it. So like if the game that came out that's there today came out then, and they also didn't totally fuck the messaging up about what was and wasn't in the game, it would have been a smashing success. But they put it out a year too early and lied about it.
So basically, it was the Justice League of video games.
It could have been like a really cool thing that was really popular for maybe not like a Fortnite, not like in everyone in the world, but like it could have been a real cool thing, and it was not.
Yeah.
But you know what's interesting about Fortnite that kind of ties it back to classic gaming is Fortnite is a very simple premise, which is what people like from games, I think. I mean, well, there are games that people like that are really complex because I'm one of these people. I really like, multitasking and micromanaging stats and things and armor and numbers, and I love doing that stuff. But, the kind of games that appeal to a huge demographic are simplistic games, which Fortnite, PUBG, very simplistic, like, premise. You're on an island, weapons kill each other, island progressively gets smaller, forces everybody into the center. It's, like, perfect. That's a fucking genius concept, actually. Like, I'm not even mad that game's popular, because that premise is genius. Just like another game that, broke out was Minecraft. Same exact thing. Such a fucking simple premise. Blocky graphics, like build things. You can build whatever, mine stuff, and you use the stuff you mine to build things. It's very simple, and the simple graphics. And that game was like an absolute smash hit because it was simplistic.
What's funny is that a couple years ago we bought Connor that Alienware machine, but it's a Steam machine.
Yeah.
You can boot into, it's a dual boot. You can boot into Steam or you can boot into Windows.
Yeah.
And he hasn't been playing it as much lately, but for the first like 6 or 7 months that he had the thing, I mean, he was playing all this like old 8-bit, 16-bit shit on there, and he loved it. And I was like, this stuff looks like Contra. It looks like totally old school. And I think there's like still a real good market there for kids getting into that type of gaming.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
the side scrollers and shit like that.
My biggest complaint with all not all games, I guess, but like I said a few minutes ago, I mean, I bought Dead Space a long time ago now, and I'll do this. I bought Resident Evil Nemesis for PlayStation.
Yeah.
And I'm going to play this, and they're good games. They're great games, but it was just too much for me. I want to just plug in, clunk the cartridge in and go at it and have some fun for maybe only 5 or 10 minutes. I could go for like a couple hours maybe, but it depends on where I'm at, right? And that's what I think made these older games so addictive, right? Pitfall, for example, there's a reason that it's number one across most lists of like all the classic, 2600 games, is because Pitfall is ridiculously addictive. It really is. You can go for days playing that game, and I have. I think too. Well, I mean, that's what I thought. I think there's just it's simple. It's an idea. Just go play a game.
It's built on the thing that kind of all of the greatest games, even outside of video games, but games in a general sense, like the easy to learn, hard to master thing. Mm-hmm. Like a game that is as fun, you might get sick of it because you've done the same thing a lot, but it's kind of the fun that is there is the same fun the first time you play it versus 100 hours later. Yeah. And it's like mastery, and also just it feels good to play, and also there is like a progression of personal progression. Like I'm not necessarily there's a high score aspect of it, but I'm not necessarily like seeing my level gauge go up like an RPG. It's more like my personal level gauge of knowing how well I do with this game goes up every time I play it.
So there's two games that came out that are kind of retro in style are Super Meat Boy and Celeste. Yeah. And like you were saying, the personal progression is you can feel it in those games because like Super Meat Boy is very simplistic controls. It's like run, jump. You can do a wall jump.
So fucking good. Those games feel so good.
Like
is why
silk.
Half the reason why they're so good.
But so like you'll start playing Super Meat Boy and it feels really fucking hard when you first play it, and then so you play it for a while and you go through several levels and you'll go back to an earlier level and it's like the easiest thing that's ever that
Yeah.
and you feel that progression, you feel yourself getting better, and there's like more of like a personal reward from it than a game where like I think it was it might have been Skyrim. They when you leveled up in that game, they would level up the enemies around you.
Yeah, the enemies levels are always
so it never felt
relative to
like you were badass. It never felt like you were getting better at the game. It always had that same kind of like flat feel to it. But with old school games, like you can tell when you're getting better. And like back in the day, they didn't have like, you maybe had passwords and stuff, but a lot of times you would die and it would take you back to the beginning of the level, or you only had a finite amount of lives and then it would take you back to the beginning of the game. So you had to literally get better at the game to beat the game.
Well, yeah, and you didn't have pause.
I think difficulty level back is what also kind of brings people back to retro gaming, because retro games are harder than most modern games.
They're brutal.
Modern games have more of like a learning curve because there's like a million buttons and all this stuff. But just like I've seen those videos. I really hate them, but it's like kids react to this or whatever. But like you give them you give like a 10-year-old Ninja Gaiden, and he's just getting fucked up in that game.
That's
like,
a difficult game. Very difficult game.
Like they don't make hard games like that really anymore. There's too many outs now. Now it's like oh, I got the white Tanuki suit. I can't die because I don't want to get sad for 5 minutes. I mean,
I had a whole conversation about that recently with a friend of mine who I play games with, and just all about. And this comes up on. I listen to a podcast with a bunch of dudes in the late 30s, early 40s who've been playing games forever.
Yeah.
And they talk about how like, and I feel this way to some extent as well. I've never had kids, so I don't really know what it's like that much dealing with kids.
They suck.
But there's a lot of like, I feel like modern day games do not give kids enough credit. Mm-hmm. Like the kids who. Yes, if you bought a really hard game when you were a kid and you were really bad at it, it didn't always feel good to buy that game. But there were times you're just like, hey, this is my console. I saved up birthday money. I bought this game. I'm going to play this game.
This shit.
And like this kid, a 6-year-old kid doesn't know this video game. They know it's hard because they're playing it, but they don't understand how hard or like how much challenge or mastery would be required getting really good at this. So like little kids got really good at really hard games because they're just like, well, this is the game that I had, so I played the shit out of it. And it wasn't like my parents said this game was too hard, so they bought me something on my iPhone to play that was easy.
Yeah.
It's just like, there are times I want to, like, if I ever had kids, just like, hey, play this game and just try it out. And if you don't like it, we'll do something else. But, like, kids are smarter than we think. Like, our whole generation grew up with, you guys grew up with even, like, harder games or games that didn't explain themselves at all, and you just had to figure them. Even they weren't hard; they were just inscrutable, and it took intelligence to figure out what you needed to do.
And pattern memorization.
That's I just found a trick. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because Demon Attack. I was talking about that.
Yeah,
that was one of the cards I lost. So I went this past weekend and said, I'm just going to get a card. I'm going to go on eBay. Somebody will have one. It's not hard to find. And I ordered one. Literally 2 freaking days later, it shows up. Like, oh, sweet.
Yeah.
And I'm just, like, you're talking about pattern recognition, right? Mm-hmm. Like, when you're young, like, when I was young, it was like, just, like, I'm getting my ass kicked here. That's a tough game to play. But I sat down now with experience and just being, a professional for so many years, just understanding statistics and how patterns work and things like that. You can pick it up pretty easy now. Not saying the game is easy. It's actually a pain in the ass to play still. But I just found I found a way. If I did a couple of moves back and forth and went to the left, the monsters, the demons don't drop any bombs on me. They sit right next to me and just keep dropping bombs.
Well, you have you're approaching it as an adult who just can learn from their mistakes in a way that a kid will just keep doing something and just be like, well, I died, I guess I got to go again. You just be like, oh, yeah, I died here, this is what I have to do, this is what I need to do to prevent this other thing from happening.
So I mean, those games, like you were saying, they were vicious.
Well, I think it was really
vicious games.
Cuphead was the game that really brought difficulty level and gaming to the forefront. Because Cuphead is actually it's like a throwback to a retro time where you had to, your skills had to improve for you to progress in the game. And that concept was so alien to people now that people were, mad at the developers of Cuphead, saying that it was, they were like upset saying, well, no, there's people that can't see parts of the game because they can't get good enough. Like, well, that's just too damn bad.
It's the way it is.
I didn't see the
been
ending
like
in Ninja Gaiden until I was in my fucking 35, and I had save states on an
That game's a
emulator.
pain in the ass.
You
That
know,
game's
like
always been a pain in the ass.
But that's so satisfying. And I feel like that's that feeling of satisfaction of finally getting
What's
past
accomplishment?
something.
It's accomplishment.
Yeah, you don't get those from like big open world, just collectathon kind of games because there's really like
Yeah. Well, here's an example. And I kind of have a list. I made notes for this show because I can't keep anything straight in my brain anymore. Atari made a game. You remember the movie Crawl? I think I've talked about the movie Crawl.
Yeah.
I like that movie. People want to shit on it. Fuck them. They're stupid. It's a fun movie to watch. They actually made an Atari did an adaptation of that game. And it was just we were talking about artwork earlier. And this is what Atari was famous for. And I've read a bunch of stuff of how they got the art they had. Because you'd see these, of course, Crawl. Well, they just that was easy. They just had, a rendering of just part of the movie, an action scene, right?
You mean like the cover art?
Yeah, the cover art.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. And how it ties into the game, right? Because then you look at Crawl, the game, and it don't look anything like that at all. Raiders of the Lost Ark, same shit. I mean, the music was so bad. It's so fun to listen to the 2600 Raiders of the Lost Ark game when you flick it on. It's dun, 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 we all know the theme, right? But they didn't have the technology to replicate that song properly. So
it's that.
Do 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 do.
Well, yeah, with the only. The 2600 had like 2 sound channels.
Yeah,
It had to interrupt its music to play sound effects.
But Crawl was a game you could beat, like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Crawl was a game you could beat, and yeah, I had to work on it. I had to put time into it.
Did you say crawl?
Crawl.
Oh, man.
Crawl.
Yeah, Crawl.
Yeah.
I had
Crawl.
to work on it, but I finally was able to beat the game, and I had to improve my skill set. There was things I had to get better at. There was things I had to get faster at. I had to understand things, and I eventually beat the game. And what a great feeling that is.
Yeah. Well, and think of...
It's a sense of accomplishment, like I said.
And I hate every time, and it still happens, I hate every time someone who just says, like, video games had no non-entertainment value, or like, hey, these are bad, they're rotting your brain, so don't let your kids play them. Because it's just like, I learned, like, grit, whatever phrase you want to call it, like, hey, if you fail at something, you should try again, and maybe take 2 seconds, analyze what went wrong that time, and maybe try something different. And I learned that 10 times more playing games than I ever did from taking fucking spelling tests. Like,
yeah,
I think there's a lot of value in, like, hiding useful life skills in something fun. Like, there's 10 billion pages of studies about gamification and learning and all these buzzwords, but there's like a lot of science to, like, hey, a kid will want to solve a problem if that problem is even a little bit fun, and they can probably learn from it in the process. And there are a lot of people who just, like, still think that I'm not even talking about, like, the Christian devil folks being like, oh, if you play video games you worship Satan. No, I'm just talking about, like, if you play video games, your brain's going to turn to mush and you're going to get fat and die.
I mean, it's engaging, like, all your senses.
Yeah.
And your hand-eye coordination. And, when I was growing up, I was playing a lot of RPGs. That's a ton of reading. I'm not saying that shit was, like, the greatest prose especially back in Nintendo days when, the translation was a little iffy. But
all your bases are...
Yeah, but it was RPGs. There's a lot of reading going on, and almost every aspect of my personality, my skill set now comes from video games, growing up on them. To be honest, I mean, I grew up, I was a nerd and I was super introverted and I was really unpopular in school, and video games were like the only place I felt safe and like comfortable and in control.
Yeah.
And I think that outlet, if you take that away from some kids, that could be a bad thing. I mean, up until Columbine, when everybody started blaming school shootings on video games because and it's always people that don't play games that say that shit too. You're like, oh, you play games? No, because they don't understand. They don't understand that 99% of people that play video games actually get stuff out of them, and the 1% that shoot up places were going to do it no matter what they were doing as a hobby. In my opinion, they could have been stamp collecting. They would have shot a school
and
up 'cause they're
especially
off.
relevant considering Trump's recent accusation regarding video games and violence. Back in the media again.
We're bringing this shit back
even
from the
after
90s,
Jack Thompson days.
Yeah, Jack Thompson. He's probably like, fucking rubbing his hands together.
Well, the thing with the rot your
I'm back,
brain,
baby.
the rot your brain aspect of video games that you mentioned, Justin, that did come from some place. I mean, there's a few ideas that have been out there, but one of the things was when Pac-Man hit.
Oh yeah, because
hit
there's
our
an
shores.
addictive aspect of games too, which is negative, and I
well,
understand.
And in the coin op, that meant a shitload more money. People kept plunking quarters in there. So one of the things I know historically that was said is that there were a lot of pissed off parents. Their kids were blowing every single penny they gave them, or every single quarter they gave them, in arcades.
Oh, yeah.
And they weren't doing anything else with their money. So that's where that idea came from, where parents started hitting the streets saying, video games are bad for our kids. They're rotting their brain. All they think about is going to this arcade now and shoving quarters in this machine over and over again. And that's kind of where that idea came from. 'Cause I remember the same thing happened to me. I mean, I felt kind of, there was that era too for me where I felt like, well, games are bad. You know, they're bad for me. I was programmed to a certain degree. And all it really came from is because my parents didn't want to give me any more goddamn money for that.
And that's one of those things where, like, that makes far more sense than when I go on Facebook and see people in 2018 make the same argument.
Well, it's ridiculous.
That's what I mean.
It was
like,
ridiculous
it's not,
then.
Sure, it was ridiculous in the Space Invaders Pac-Man era, and then now, 30, 40 plus years later, it should be people making the exact same arguments just because they're spouting the things that they were raised, or it's like, oh yeah, well, this was bad when I was a kid. Nothing has changed because
there's still a
nothing changes.
stigma attached to gaming,
absolutely.
which I find hilarious because someone will be like, "Oh, you play video games? Like you fucking watch, 7 seasons of The Bachelor at a time, but you spend your time great, but I want to play some games. All of a sudden, I'm wasting my time."
I would consider gaming much more productive than that.
See now, like for me, coming up during that 80s era of the giant arcades. Like we had a couple on Gratiot.
Dude, they were everywhere.
Within a couple miles of here, we had 2 huge arcades. That was like
awesome.
That was like family time for me. Like my dad be like, "Okay, let's go get a pizza at Pizza Hut," and then we would go to the arcade and we would play fucking Galaga all night long. Because my dad, to this very day, 72 years old, still loves Galaga.
It's because Galaga's
a great game.
Because Galaga is a classic game. We
Yeah.
would go and we'd play Galaga and Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man. But, all those vintage games, it was just fun. I played a lot of pinball, though, too.
Pinball is great.
Yeah, pinball
Pinball's
is
a lot of
great.
fun.
But, it was really like something that we did together. Also, my dad's cousin was the manager at Major Magics on Gratiot.
Oh, dude.
So I could like go up there with like my aunt and my cousins, and he would just give us like the giant, like extra large cups full of tokens. He'd just be like, "Here you go. Give us each one of them." And we would just play games for 5 or 6 hours,
Yeah.
But it was a family thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, I'm just sitting in the basement playing Atari all day long. It was something, it helped develop hand-eye coordination, but it was something we could go and do with our brothers or sisters or cousins, aunts, uncles, dads, moms, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think people forget that was, a big thing in the 80s, that parents would go do this with their kids.
The death of arcades is definitely one of the saddest things to come out of like the online gaming revolution or what have you. Like when I went to Japan, it's not dead there, and the arcades are absolutely amazing. And there were like, gaming doesn't have the stigma in Japan that it does here.
Right.
Like everybody plays games. So many people play games, it doesn't matter. It's like so ubiquitous there that it doesn't have the stigma here. Like I would go into an arcade and see a guy in a 3-piece business suit gaming it up, like smoking a cigarette.
Stories, it's like, oh yeah, it's lunchtime, so there's some salary man from some Japanese business just playing Gundam Extreme Versus or whatever in the arcade in Japan, and that's totally okay.
But it used to be like, you hang out with your friends and you go to the arcade, and you'd make friends at the arcade. You'd go to the arcade and you put your quarter up on a thing, so you're standing there waiting, and you're talking to the dude next to you, or that's how you hung out. It was like a place to go. Like you'd be like, hey, let's get all the people and go to the arcade and hang out.
it should be. It can be a social thing, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it totally was.
And it's kind of the same thing now. I mean, having kids that are teenagers like Connor, he is like way into video games. He kind of got into video games at the beginning of the Minecraft thing, so he was really into that for a long time. But when he has his friends over, what do? They're on the Nintendo Switch, they're on the Xbox One, they're playing games on the computer, and it's not just that they're wasting time, that's like they're socializing, and they're enjoying that together. So I think some of that stigma is just total bullshit.
No, we did that a lot. That was our social life growing up when it came to playing. Hey, wait, you got Spider-Man? Bring it over, dude.
Yeah.
Oh, dude,
Yeah.
can I borrow that for the night?
Yeah, that never
we were
went away.
trading
I mean, it
games.
was the same thing for me. Just different consoles, different time period, but we did the same shit. Oh,
Yeah,
you bought this
yeah.
game? Oh, come over. I got,
There's always
And we'd
that one
sit there and
rich
play.
kid on the street that had all the games because I got 2 games
Yep.
a year. I got birthday game and I got a Christmas game, so I had to pick wisely. I'd be fucking pouring over Nintendo Powers trying to pick the game because you only got one. So
Yeah.
if it sucked, you were shit out of luck for 6 months.
That was what we did.
Yeah.
I don't care what console it was. It's just what
exactly.
we did. And that was a big part of, at least I know me growing up for that, decade, I guess, for me, because it did bleed into NES also. And we just would sit there and play games for hours. And we get pissed off at each other and we talk shit to each other if we were playing against each other, of course. But we were always friends at the end. That's a great thing. I really have a problem hearing people say, going back to that point, that they're rotting your brain. I think there is a negative. I think too much of anything is bad for you.
Mm-hmm.
We all know a person. I personally know a person whose life went to shit because of video games.
Probably, I would bet it would be like an online RPG.
Yeah, I was about
That's
to
what
say,
it was.
I had
Yep.
to quit WoW because I almost failed my
EverQuest.
senior year of college.
I watched a guy literally. I lived with him for about a year and a half, and I watched him go from, he was a tall dude, about 6'2", tall guy, fit, stayed active.
I'm not saying her name.
Stayed active. No, I'm not saying any names. Stayed active, and then he moved in with me in my house, and I watched. It was actually kind of scary to watch it happen, man. I watched him just balloon out. I mean, over a very short amount of time, and then just stop doing everything that he was doing before except playing his game.
Yeah.
I actually broke up with a fiance because of EverQuest.
Holy
it was
shit.
like one of the
Wow.
main reasons because he literally played that game 10, 12 hours a day and got gross and fat and like didn't go out and wouldn't go anywhere with me.
Yeah.
I would be like, hey, can we go see this movie? Oh, I got a raid. So, and
Oh my God.
So if I'm saying
I mean,
you're
I've
playing,
been that person, so not in a long time, and I stopped because of that exact situation.
But you know what's funny is I am like a ginormous gamer too. So if I'm saying you're playing too much, it's too much because I play a lot of games.
Yeah.
too.
Oh yeah, because it became a second job. It wasn't.
It was.
Playing
Like, I told him
yeah.
that.
Playing WoW was not me happy, fun game time. It
No.
was. It was like a summer between a couple years of college where it was just like, all right, I'm working 50 hours a week at doing fucking tech work at somewhere, and then also playing this game 40 hours a week.
He would
too.
have exact times he'd have to be on, like clocking in, and should he be
I
like,
raided like 4 nights a week from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m.
and he's
I-
like, he wouldn't eat dinner with me. Like it was so, I had to break off the relationship.
Sorry
it was so
I mentioned
bad.
this.
No, it's not bad. It's
What
a good
was
time.
what was the Zelda game for the Nintendo 64?
Ocarina of Time?
Yeah.
Yeah, so here's my bad gaming story, and this revolves around retro gaming. I got Ocarina of Time, and it was right around the time me and Alicia were getting married. Alicia just so happened to lose her job. I happened to lose my job. I got laid off literally the week before we got married, and we got a lot of money for our wedding, and we put it all in the bank. And when we came home, we got sucked into Ocarina of Time.
Holy shit.
And literally, for like a month, we lived off of our wedding money.
Oh my God.
Sorry, people.
You fucking
That sounds
bum.
amazing. Actually,
We lived off of our wedding money. We smoked dope. We stayed up like all night, every night till
That does
7 or
sound
8
kinda cool.
in the morning. And as a couple, we played Zelda.
Well, that's not a bad thing. It's a very bonding thing.
I do that
Yeah.
like once a year when a game comes out I really want to play. That's like something I get excited about.
Yeah, I took like 5 days off of work when Zelda for Switch came out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't. Well, that's so. But the key part of that is that at the end of that month, you probably got jobs.
Oh yeah,
and
we
then
did.
moved on with your life.
Yes, we did.
It didn't
in
go
a way
down.
that
It didn't
maybe
keep
not
going
everyone
down.
does.
Yeah, we actually did. We both got fair jobs, and we were good to go.
You
from
picked
there.
a great game for it.
Yeah,
Ocarina of Time
was
is a
good.
very, even divorced from the idea that it's a very good video game, it is an extraordinarily important video game for
Well-
3D. If that game didn't come out, we might not have 3D action games that we have now.
Yeah,
It invented hold down the hold down targeting camera system that's used in basically like every 3D action game where you actually lock onto targets. That game invented a conceptual idea that every 3D video game has used since then.
You know,
It was
Nintendo
so
seems
hard.
like they invent a lot of things.
Well, they had to in order
Yeah.
to make they wanted to be so much at the forefront of 3D at that era. They needed to invent the camera concept for
Yeah.
Mario 64. They needed to invent lock-on targeting for Zelda. Those are things that's
I always thought
hey,
it was funny they had literally somebody holding a camera in the game because the idea of a camera was so foreign
Yeah.
that they had to have a thing like to explain to you the concept of the game camera, but it was like a physical thing, something holding a camera.
Oh yeah, I remember all
Like
that
the idea
terminology.
of camera
Yeah.
was they invented that game camera.
And I know we didn't quite get to it, but I part of that conversation about retro gaming appealing to more people is that when I try to introduce games to people who don't play a lot of games, controlling three-dimensional characters and a character and a camera at the same time is one of the most foreign ideas to people who don't play games regularly. You give them a 2D game, they say move, you hit left, your character goes left, hit right, your character goes right.
Yeah.
Is a really understandable concept in a way that you can move in 3D space and also you move relative to the camera and you can also move what camera your direction is facing. That's really hard for people who don't play a lot of games.
Yeah, it's a steep. I think it's a steep learning curve for anybody.
Yeah.
Who is just used to the 2D universe.
Yeah.
like me.
Yeah.
Because I'm a terrible gamer. So yeah, this is a pretty wide subject.
Yeah.
we scraped the surface. I did want to throw a couple of these out. I did make some dumb lists here, as I know we got to cut pretty soon here. But so I threw some lists out here of a couple, at least my Hall of Fame. I don't know if you guys remember any. If you can recognize it, Chris, you probably recognize more than anybody. But Berserk, which is a coin op,
Berserk is great.
coin op adaptation. Breakout.
Oh yeah.
The original Atari Breakout. Combat, which is what the original VCS shipped with. That one cartridge that had 50 games on it. Well,
Did you know they
I
made
had
the Combat 2 that they made that never came out is on the Atari Flashback?
yeah, I
You
have
can
it.
actually, you can actually play the not officially released
Yeah.
Combat 2 on there. That's really
Yeah, I have that. I have that at home.
with
It's super
submarines
cool.
or boats or whatever the non the original
Yep.
one is tanks and planes and they added the third mode in
Yep.
Combat 2.
Defender, which is another coin op
Oh, yeah.
adaptation, which was one of the finer games.
Oh,
Atari
Defender
did.
is sweet.
That one really
That was another
aggressive.
arcade classic,
That game
too.
felt good. That was a fun game to play.
That game is programmed to suck a quarter out of you every 34 seconds.
Pretty much.
No, that's what the designer
They
of that
figured
game.
it out, yeah.
They did that on purpose.
They talked about that. They actually were getting stats on that, how many quarters, and they figured
Yeah.
it over time. It's
There's
crazy.
a GDC talk from that guy. I don't remember his name, but the Defender designer.
And I don't know if it was Rob Fulop who did that. No, it wasn't Rob
No,
Fulop.
I don't remember. I used to know when I was
'Cause I've heard that talk.
smarter. Yeah.
Joust, another great coin op adaptation. Sorry, I mentioned Kroll already. Moon Patrol looked like dog shit on Atari compared to the
Card
yeah. It looked, but it was fun. It was fun to play. Still, it felt the same. It didn't look
I played
nearly
that
as
game
good.
relatively recently. Actually.
Yeah, the coin op was phenomenal looking. Atari's didn't look good, but it felt the same.
Yeah.
So it was fun to play.
Throw them out there. We got to wrap this.
Phoenix, which is another coin op.
I don't know that one.
Feels and looks a lot like Demon Attack, and it came out not too long after Demon Attack came out. So maybe we're talking
A little bit of a
4 or 5 months.
ripoff.
Yeah. Raiders of the Lost Ark. We said that. Real Sports Baseball was one I loved to play. Space Invaders, we mentioned that one. Street Racer, completely ridiculous looking. It was a paddle game.
Yeah.
Yar's Revenge. Mentioned
Yeah,
that one too.
Yar's one's great.
Written by Howard Scott Warshaw, who did write E.T. Activision, Chopper Command, Dragster, Kaboom. There was one, people.
yeah.
Kaboom was fun.
I have a porn version of Kaboom. It's called Beat 'em and Eat 'em.
Oh, I've seen that.
Jesus.
It's
We
got
talked
gu-
about that one night because I did download all the emulators of all the Atari porn
Yeah.
games for a fucking goof, and they were hilarious. Yeah, beat them and eat them.
All right, we got to wrap.
All right, Kung Fu,
Kung Fu.
Pitfall, iMagic. Fuck you. We're not going anywhere. We're staying right here. Is somebody?
Oh my God.
Are we going to get arrested if we go like 2 minutes longer?
We're running out of space.
Oh
We're
my
running out
God.
of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
iMagic, Atlantis, Cosmic Arc, and Demon Attack. Those are the ones I played the shit out of. I do have an NAS, but we have to go because Chris is going to throw me off the air. Guys, have a great night. I'm going to get the big hook yank out here.
Need to play music off.
You should play Warlords.
We got to do another one of these. This is fun.
Yeah.
It's fun just riffing on these ideas.
We got tons more we could cover still. So.
Games are just as important as movies.
We could just go by system, really.
Oh my
Yeah.
God,
Sure.
totally.
I
So
would
all right,
love to spend an hour and a half talking about the TurboGrafx 16.
Sweet.
all right, Chris. Well,
All
you
right.
want us off here, so tell us to
Yeah.
go away now.
Episode 78. Check us out at themoviesleuth.com. Scott Lambert likes to eat poop. With that, we're out of here. Bye.
Peace.
That's disgusting.
You're disgusting.
Stop it.
This was streaming live on your personal page, by the way.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was.
How?
Guy shared it there.
Visit us at www.themoviesleuth.com and find The Movie Sleuth on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and iTunes.